Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Musician's Mentor podcast. As usual, I am your host, Travis Mark, and I'm stoked to say that on the show today, I have the highly talented composer, percussionist, improvising artist, cultural diplomat, educator, multimedia guru, Mr. Tom Teasley. Tom is an American-born drummer/musician who's had quite an interesting off-the-beaten-path type career, which we talk about during the course of this interview. We talk about his world travels, we talk about his time as a percussionist in the Middle East, as well as his studies with the late, great Joe Morello. I had a wonderful time talking with Tom, and I hope that you enjoy listening to our chat as much as I did having it. You can find Tom's albums and all additional Tom Teasley information via tomteasley.com. Don't forget to check out musicians-mentor.com for all things Travis Mark and Musicians Mentor related. As usual, please continue to check out our affiliation with the lovely folks over at Soundbrenner. And if you are getting any insightful or useful information from these interviews, please do leave us a rating, review, or a share across your social medias or favorite streaming platforms, or both. It's all very helpful. I'm going to quit my blabbering. Let's jump straight into this. Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only and very gracious Mr. Tom Teasley. Alrighty. Mr. Tom Teasley, drummer, composer, percussionist, musician, just all-round great guy from the few minutes conversation we've had before we hit record. I want to welcome you to the Musician's Mentor podcast. I want to thank you for your time. And as usual, I would like you to give us a brief introduction as to who Tom Teasley is for my listeners, please.
I'd be happy to. Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me for the podcast. I've been looking forward to it for a while. As you said, my name is Tom Teasley, and I am largely a drummer percussionist, but I do a lot of other things too. I work as a composer for sound design for music theater. I perform live to movies. Mostly recently, I've added Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton, and I have 5 of those recorded with my performances embedded, and then I tour that a lot. And I've worked a lot as a cultural envoy for the State Department, so that's taken me to the Middle East and Samoa, New Zealand, China, South Korea, and pretty much all over the world doing that. And that allows me to put together music, not just only for the aesthetic value, but for the functional value of serving as a means of communication. And in addition to that, I record sound design for psychotherapists that they use for guided meditation. And I just completed a project of that recently. And what else am I doing? My 2 most recent recordings, one is called Lunch Break, and it features Dave Ballou, a fabulous trumpet player. So it's a little on the unusual side, trumpet and percussion, but it just got a fabulous review yesterday and all about jazz and is scheduled to be reviewed in Downbeat magazine in the May issue. And I coupled that with, they call it a duo of duos, with another CD that I did with my longtime collaborator and colleague who unfortunately passed away just after the recording, Charles Williams, that is all voice and percussion. And it is a lot of poetry by Langston Hughes, James Weldon Johnson, Martin Luther King, coupled with some African and African-American folk songs. And the name of that is called Wisdom. And you can find both of those on my Bandcamp page. And you should be able to at least find the Lunch Break on Spotify. Wisdom seemed to, for some reason, not collaborate so well with Spotify, but you can find it on Apple Music and Amazon and all those other ones. But yeah, I'm just delighted to be here and happy to do a deeper dive into any of those elements that I talked about.
And we are going to do that indeed. I'd like to backtrack just a little. I mean, we don't have to go into like your full life story here, but talk to me about how you got into music and what in particular seemed to draw you to the drums.
Well, I'm a product of the 70s and the 80s. So it was the rock and roll thing, the energy that got me into it. Uh, I was fortunate in that I lived in a neighborhood where there were some kids that were a few years older than me and played guitar, and nobody was playing the drums. I was interested in the drums because I had seen, I think it was a jazz group that came to my elementary school, and I was just blown away with the drums. And then after that, I noticed there was a snare drum in the cafeteria, where they would teach the lessons, and I went in just the way kids do, and I tapped the snare drum, and it was like electricity went through me. So it was in the ether that I wanted to play the drums, and then this opportunity occurred. So by the time I was 12, 13 or something like that, I was playing gigs. I gave up my paper route. I figured it was better to stay up late at night as opposed to get up early in the morning. And it wasn't until I guess I was a junior in high school, so that I finally started to study. So I wasn't reading. I was not a schooled musician, and I got with a good teacher who Al Murs, who was working with the National Symphony, and I kind of faked my way into Peabody Conservatory, and so I did that for a couple of years, and I went out on the road. At that point, I was kind of in school and traveling a bit, and finally graduated. And I'm giving you more detail than you asked for, but
No, that's great.
I'm going to take you up to date, kind of. And so after I graduated school, while a lot of my colleagues were, taking orchestral auditions and or looking to become a music teacher, I knew not both of those were not what I wanted to do. So I found myself in a rhythm and blues band, and I started touring nationally, and found myself spending a lot of time in New Orleans. So New Orleans is as you know, is kind of a melting pot of all of these world cultures through the experience of being an American. And it was like I was hearing rhythms that I wasn't hearing, on the radio and in the music I was playing. I mean, I was kind of, but there was a different spin on it, and it certainly wasn't what I was hearing at Peabody Conservatory. So knew that I wanted a part of that. I just instinctively, I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but I knew that I wanted that to be a part of the lexicon that I was drawing from. So I started to seek out master drummers from first Africa, India, the Middle East, Cuba, and just all over the place. And because I had been to music school at that time, during that same time, I was also studying jazz with Joe Morello, and so I had a way of codifying a lot of this rhythmic and technical information, and finding where there's similarities, where there are differences, where they intersect. And I just began writing that out, mostly for my own study, but as it turned out, also to be shared with students and at workshops. So fast forward a few years, I was beginning to do a little bit of international touring, and I was invited to perform at an international music festival in Bahrain, small country in the Persian Gulf. So, and I have a solo thing that I do. So that's another thing that makes me a little unique, is that a lot of the work I do is as a solo percussionist. But when I heard these Bahraini drummers, it wasn't like the traditional Middle Eastern maksums and melodies and stuff like that. It was these pearl diving rhythms, and it was very East African. And interestingly enough, I was hearing like the meters, hey Pocky way. It was like I was hearing those rhythms, or at least I was hearing how those rhythms could live in synchronicity,
Yeah.
with what was happening. So, and I at that point I had some chops on the darbuka. So I went to the producer and I said, "Look, I want to play with these guys," and I said, I don't know what I'm going to do, and I don't know if they'll let me, but that's what I want." And they could not have been more welcoming, and we we played, and it went really well. It went so well that the U.S. Embassy was brought in as my fiscal sponsor for the program, and there were representatives of the embassy there, and there were also the cultural minister from Bahrain was there, and they're used to seeing Americans on stage performing Americana music, be it jazz, country, whatever, but not so used to seeing them on stage performing with the indigenous culture.
Yeah.
So the next thing I knew, I was back home. Then I was back in Bahrain. Then I was in Saudi Arabia, all over, up and down. And then I went to Jerusalem, and I was in the West Bank and in the Israeli section. And then after that, I came back and they said, "Do you want to go to Iraq?" And so I do a lot of frame drumming, and Iraq is kind of like the motherland of frame drumming. So I said, "Yeah, I think I do." And so I spent almost a month in Iraq, all the way from Erbil to Basra, and collaborating with like Persian classical style musicians, and then all the way to a in Basra, there's an African Iraqi population that only plays drums from that area and only plays rhythms from that area as well. So I did a collaboration with them as well. And then that led to trips to South Korea and New Zealand and Samoa, and then have been working somewhat with a young shin player. A young shin is a Chinese hammered dulcimer. So I went to China for a while, and I was doing a teaching residency at Beijing Language and Culture University. And then I went back last year and did a tour all through southern China. So, and then there were several other international stops along the way. So that's kind of what got me to this place. And then what I didn't say is that during that time that I did the deep dive into, I guess, world percussion, we'll call it. I kind of put the drum set on the side, which was my first instrument, but I was using a lot of drum set techniques. I was using a lot of 4-part coordination on these hand drums. So then comes COVID, and actually was a busy time for me because I was doing a lot of virtual work. But I decided that I wanted to use that time to take this whole thing full circle again. So then I decided, I think what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a lot of the world percussion concepts and try and bring that back to the drum set. So at this stage of the game, I'm kind of working in both camps, and I find it interesting because one area informs the other. And when I do these Charlie Chaplin films, I do it pretty much strictly at the drum set, and then just like last week, I did some. Actually, this last tour I was doing, I played with the Middle Eastern Ensemble at Virginia Tech and Sweetbriar College. So that was all the Middle Eastern small hand percussion. And then the week before that, I was playing with a folk singer from Ethiopia, and was playing djembe and a variety of those instruments too. So that's kind of what got me here. The only thing I neglected to mention is somewhere along the line, I got interested in technology. First it was looping, or first it was sequencing, and then after that it was looping. So I'm interested in taking instruments from one part of the world and frequently interchanging techniques from a different culture, a different part of the world. And then I'm also interested in taking very ancient instruments and combining that with kind of recent developments in digital technology. So that's where we are now.
There's so much that I could try and dissect there. And I've got a couple ignorant questions before I continue with the music.
Okay.
Sort of questions. My first question would be, when you're going to all of these places, especially the Middle East, are they sending you with a translator, or are you communicating purely with music, like on a music level? Like, how do you communicate with your...
It's a great question, and the answer to that is both. So suffice to say, when I'm traveling on the behalf of the State Department, they've got the best of the best translators to work. However, so that kind of gets us through the formalities and the introductions and all that kind of stuff. Once it gets to the music, then it is really the music that becomes the form of communication, which is why the thing is so powerful. Frequently, there is very, very little opportunity for rehearsals in these. And when I say little, I mean maybe 20 minutes.
Wow.
So it could be something we just play a little bit and go, yeah, well, that'll work, I think, or something like if it's something that I'm not familiar, they're not familiar, well, maybe we'll work on that next time. And I should also say that when I come and I'm putting my toe in the rhythmic musical world of these other cultures, of which I'm not obviously not a primary source musician. There's a world of stuff that I don't know. So what I don't consider myself really is ethnomusicologist. That to me an ethnomusicologist is not always, but frequently, uh, somebody that has made an academic study of very specific cultures without and sometimes they put it into practice, but they are not usually integrating it into something that is unique and total. It's kind of an academic study that is rather compartmentalized.
Yeah.
So I think of in that regard, I think of myself very much as a jazz musician. That's what I do. I'm not playing straight ahead and not playing bebop or that kind of thing. Although I'm thinking about doing a bebop record with all Middle Eastern instruments, but that's another subject.
That'd be amazing.
But I am interested in like the feel, the groove of all that stuff, the funk, and then how can I superimpose like a South Indian tea-high, into some Max Roach vocabulary. I when I was playing with this Middle Eastern ensemble, even though I toured a lot to the Middle East, that there were some of the rhythms I was not familiar with. I was not familiar with certainly by name. So it's always a learning experience. I feel like every time I have an opportunity to put my thing out there, I don't come across as like I'm the expert in any of this stuff. Really, it's like I'm an interested student, and I have something to share, and I think I have something to offer. But in addition to that, I have a lot to learn.
Yeah.
So especially when you're traveling to different cultures, and let's say there's a little bit of there's tension as there was in the Middle East, and actually there is all over the world now. Then that kind of approach I think is healthy, and allows, and getting back to what I said earlier, allows the music to serve a functional purpose, to serve as a form of communication, as opposed to just how can I put a South Indian tea-high into Max Roach. That's cool, but if I'm working with Indian musicians, it becomes part of a grander dialogue.
Yeah. While we're talking about the learning aspects, and sorry, since you mentioned Joe Morello, talk to me what it was like studying with him a little bit.
Wow, Joe Morello, man, what a
yeah, what a dude, huh?
what an amazing person, an amazing talent, and what a character. But by the time I got to Joe, I was working a lot as a professional, and I had graduated school, and so I was looking for something to elevate to the next level, and at that point in time, I was thinking about technique, and there's never been, I won't say never, but I have yet to encounter someone with as elegant technique as he had. And you may or may not know that when he was very young, he was a violinist.
No, I didn't know that.
And I think he was 12 years old, and he played the Mendelssohn Violin Concerto with the Boston Symphony. So what that says is that in addition to all of this brilliant technique and drum stuff that he had together, he also came to the table with a level of musicianship just out of the gate that almost nobody has.
Yeah.
And he was a voracious learner. He went through a variety of teachers, and I consider what he did very much a template as to what I did. He studied with somebody that just kind of got his basic technique together, and then he studied with I think this guy named Spivak, who was an expert in like the molar techniques and all of
Yeah.
this, the forearm coming in stuff. And then he studied with Billy Gladstone, at Radio City Music Hall, who developed his finger technique. And and it was really Joe that kind of took that and said, okay, how can I bring that together to create one elegant technique that uses one. I draw from one pool to accomplish something if I want more power, or and I draw from another one if I'm looking for more finesse.
Yeah.
So it's really amazing. I don't know the drummers out there in the audience, and maybe you are familiar with a George Stone book called
Yeah.
Stick and yeah.
Yeah.
So it's probably the most common book ever. We would do those first 3 pages. There must be a couple of dozen possibilities to do those. So you could, yeah, I could spend my entire life never getting past those 3 pages with all of those possibilities. So yeah, he was just a combination of a brilliant thinker, a brilliant musician, and a voracious practicer. I mean, we might think we practice a lot, but this guy, when he was deep into it, I mean, he was probably at it 8 hours a day, and very focused practice. You know. So, and he was one of those guys that he could go to India and like hang with the tabla players. He doesn't play tabla, but if you've ever seen him play with his hands on the drum, you know, uh, yeah, and I never really talked to him about that because that was I wasn't really into the hand percussion during that time. But I'd be if I could go back and ask him, I'd be curious to see if that's something that he developed. I mean, of course, Papa Joe Jones did a lot of that too, or did he study that, or did he just get it? When he was in India and the Middle East.
Yeah.
Fascinating guy, the way he pulled all that stuff together.
You're one of 2 guys that I've ever met that have studied with him, and I'm envious because huge fan of him and his work. And like you say, just genius of a musician and a guy. Anyway, let's move this back to you. So you mentioned your releases, Lunch Break and Wisdom, and I saw that you had a few other things out there as well. I watched a few of your videos. I want to break this down into a few sort of subtext kind of questions, mostly about recording in general. So, question 1 is, how does an artist, or you personally as an artist, market their music in a world that now releases up to about 120,000 releases per day? What's your strategy?
That's a good question. And when I completely develop that strategy, I'll make sure you're among the first to know. So I mentioned that I did a lot of theater work at one point. So when that was happening, I would record the soundtrack to the theater piece that I was playing. And usually when I did that, almost always, I did it as a solo performer. So I had a captive audience that was there to see a theater production. I had my soundtrack as a memento of that. And so during that time, I might sell 10, 20, 30 or more CDs a night. So during that time, it was very, very easy to evaluate the juice versus the squeeze. It was pretty much always worthwhile. Of course, now fewer and fewer people even have CD players, and I'm putting them in cars anymore. So, and as we were talking about earlier, that to say that there's not a lot of money in streaming is a bit of an understatement. So the first thing that comes to mind is I do it because it's what I do. I do it to document my work. I do it to reach people who are interested in what I do. In terms of how do I make this marketable, I'm looking and I experience a variety of different ways to leverage it. So I mean, this is a simple thing, but almost every time I record something, currently at least I record video of it too. You know, my engineer records audio and video, so having the video is powerful because that's something that attracts reviewers. It's something that potentially attracts people who go to Bandcamp to where you can actually potentially monetize your work, and then it also attracts people to hire me for gigs, or be interested in my workshops or or private lessons or whatever it is whatever musical wear that I'm peddling at any given day. It increases that, but to be honest, the main thing is because I love music and I want to document it. So I've kind of come to the realization that when I do a recording, I'm probably not going to see a return on it like I was before. So it's unfortunate. Sometimes my music is leveraged for some of my mellower things might find their way like on Insight Timer, which is a meditation app. And that's another thing that I'm interested in doing. So providing music for, as I said, for guided meditation, but then also as a standalone thing. So some of my music is actually being double purposed for that.
Yeah.
And then some of my music has been used for the art world. So yet another thing I am interested in doing is taking some avant-garde Dadaist art and playing along to it and then superimposing my images of my performance over the original art. So that's something that I've done a few times, and then most recently at the Taubman Museum in Roanoke, Virginia, some of my music was used for an all-encompassing experience where they took the frequencies of the music and then cataloged that somehow into referenced it through a computer where each frequency was represented a shape, color, and a size. And that was in a standalone studio, or standalone experiential thing where it was on the floor and all around in the ceiling. So, I think that it requires a musician to be as creative with like what they are going to do with their music when it's done as they are with how the process that they create the music with, knowing that at the end of the day, there's no guarantees with any of this stuff. So, and there never were, but especially now. So you take what you got and you do it because you love it and you bring that conviction to it, and then you hope that that reaches and that touches somebody.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, so that's kind of the thing. Just in terms of functionality, the other thing I'll say is that it's important now, I believe. Almost everybody, as you said, there's so much music coming out, and some of it is not very good. The music's not very good. Some of it's not recorded very well either.
Yeah.
So I've got to the place now where I've got this home studio. I do a little bit of the recording, tracking myself, but more often it will be my engineer coming here using my gear. And so it's kind of the best of both worlds. It's like I have my setup, I have all my instruments that I can access at any given time, and I have somebody else to push the buttons. And I can do some like for for overdub session clients that I do. A lot of times I'll actually do the tracking and then send it to him, and then he'll work on it at home. So maybe there are some times where we work individually. And when I have more time, and one of the things I want to do is improve my recording skills, so that I can be even more self-sufficient.
So on that note, even though a lot of people do have home studios of some kind nowadays, stereotyping, because not everybody does, but a lot of people do. What are some subjects or topics or just random things that you feel up-and-coming musicians should try to prepare before going to studio or before trying to hit that record button on their home studio? Are there any characteristics they might want to explore that might allow them to be more prepared?
Yeah, of course there are. So one element that I'd say is, get your basic skills together. Practice with a metronome, practice with a click track. Get your time straight. Make sure you're in tune. All of the seemingly obvious things to work on, but sometimes get overlooked. And then the second thing I would say is press that record button early and often. So even if it's just your iPhone, it is it can be humbling, and it usually is humbling, especially at the beginning. So get that feedback initially yourself. Just in terms of how are the performances going? I mean, am I playing in time? Am I playing in tune? Am I following the form? Am I expressing something? And listen to it when you are not in the throes of actually playing it. I've never been able to play and listen with the same intensity as I can just listen when I'm not playing.
Yeah.
So I'd say that that's the first step. The second step, I think, is start to get a little bit of gear, and we're in a time of technology now where there's some good stuff, that you can get for not very much money. So one of those Zoom H6, I use it a lot. And it comes with with like a couple of stereo pair of XY microphones. So get that, and like a couple of good mics, and start then taking, working with the assumption that you've got your basic skill, your performing skills. Then start working on your recording skills. It's just another set of skill, and the only way that you get better at it is to do it, and then you do it, and you go through that same process when you're not in the throes of doing it. Then you set it aside and you listen to it and you evaluate how could it be better. So that potentially makes you more self-sufficient if that's the route that you are going to go. It also makes you a much better, shall we say, producer, if somebody else is doing it, because you're more sensitive about what to listen to. So I'd say first, just start recording things with your iPhone or whatever it is you use, and then invest $1,000, $500, and one of those H6 and a couple of decent microphones, or and then just go to work. Almost everybody's got or a lot of people have a Mac or an iPad or something. So if you have that, then you can access your Logic Pro, and that if you know what you're doing, you don't need a whole lot more, frankly.
True. And last question in regards to the recording stuff. Some guys suffer from what they call red light fever. Once they hit record, they don't seem to do what they know that they can do. So is there anything that you could offer in terms of advice on how to stay relaxed and just enjoy the recording process? Is there a way, or is there some kind of potential way to find a balance between worrying less about total perfection, being in the moment, getting the performance great, even if it's not exactly what you wanted, and learning to accept that?
Yeah, it's great, right? And I mean, it's a great question, and the so I have a variety of answers to it, and the first answer, I'll go back to what I said: press that record button often and soon, and it's just because there's only one way to get comfortable with the red light going, and that's to make the red light go often. And then after a while you will learn to relax with that because that can be part of the process, and sometimes I'll just turn on recording, and in fact, more work than I'd like to admit is done like that, but it's just kind of a stream of consciousness, and then whatever I get is what I get, and then maybe it goes into the editing process after that. So that's one thing. The second element that I'd say is don't get too precious about it. There's a lot of music that could be better, that's out there. There is a lot that could be worse. So become an honest advocate of like what you've got. If you're not ready to have something out, if you listen to it and maybe you find some trusted people, say this isn't quite ready to go out. Accept that, and then wherever the weak link is, work on it. But after a while, you can get so, especially at the early stages, you can get so deep into the weeds and stuff, you never finish anything.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm saying. Don't get like my thing is so precious, and so that it's got to be just so. Get it out, work on the next thing, and then start work on the next thing. I will say that I believe that consistency and creating music trumps. Whoop, I shouldn't have said that word. Beats. Beat,
That's great.
beats. Beats like having what the performer thinks is the final best take that they could get, because the reality is, most people don't know. At some stage of the game, basically what we're doing is we're selling perfume, and perfume is whoever smells it is good, and whatever that person thinks it's worth is, because of whatever around it is kind of the same. So I'd say that the arts are a little bit like that, in terms of the monetization, the potential monetization of the arts. So I'd say put on that recording button often, every time. There's no time not to record yourself, and always put yourself in the frame of mind. I'm playing music. I'm not just practicing. I'm playing music. Even if it's just a technical exercise, I'm playing music. And then once you've collected some stuff, get it out. Even if you don't press it, put your thing on Bandcamp, and then start the next thing.
Yeah.
Start to develop a catalog of reviewers that might be interested in what it is you're doing. Maybe it's radio people. You don't need necessarily to hire publicists right off the bat. This last piece that I did, I hired a radio publicist, but in terms of the media, a colleague, former student, I should mention his name, Jeff Cosgrove, who is very active in kind of the free jazz world, put me, and used to work for Jazz Times. So he had a collection of colleagues. He turned me on to like 150 contacts, and out of that, I think I got several radio hits and a downbeat review, and so far about 3 or 4 reviews. So there's not a lot of return, but and I hadn't been active in that genre for a long time, and in this specific genre maybe ever, and so these are now people that I can go back to. And so you've got like this little teeny snowball, and you're trying to roll it downhill and collect a little more snow on it, and the only way to actually do that is with consistency.
Yeah. Yeah, very much like learning an instrument. The only way you get better, consistency.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, especially with social media, for my generation, it was reading drum magazines and things like that. But with the advance of social media and some of these video clips and stuff, I think a lot of people possibly get disheartened because they look at something, they see somebody doing this crazy skilled whatever in a 12 to 15-minute clip, and then they want to try and realize that that actually took 10 years to get right, or whatever the case may be. And I think it disheartens a lot of people. Anyway, I'd like to talk a little bit about songwriting and composition. I know you spoke a little bit about sound design earlier. Feel free to add that in as well. But what's your general approach to the art form? And how would you advise drummers in particular wanting to try and get into songwriting or composition on how to do so?
Well, I'll start there actually, and so for drummers, you need to become literate if you're not, you need to get yourself into some remedial piano skills. You need to learn the basics of harmony. You should learn something about chord voicings, and chord extensions. So you got to, and then add to that as you see fit. Maybe you're adding Indian ragas to your thing, or whatever it is. You need to learn some tunes. Whatever genre it is, and maybe multi-genre, but learn some tunes so that you've got templates on what to use. So that's the first step for a drummer specifically. One of the things that I do a lot now is, and I used to do it even more, but I'm kind of a melodica nerd. So I love the melodica. A lot of people hate it.
Well, they're wrong.
Well, they're only partly wrong, but tangentially, I was working on an overdub for a solo thing. I'm a solo recording. I'm coming up, and there's a melodica sitting on my desk, and I go to Joe. I said, "Is there a melodica on my desk?" And he goes, "No, I don't see it at all."
That's amazing.
But I mention it because it's so small, and of course it's a melodic instrument. It's basically, for those who don't know, it's basically a piano keyboard. But from a drummer's perspective, I think one of the most intriguing things about it is that one uses their breath to control the length and volume of sound. So coming from a drum perspective, where you strike things or roll or scrape or whatever it is that you do, it's an entirely different kind of nuance that creates the sound and perpetuates the sound. So interestingly enough, I started using it because I was looking for some instruments that were rather like some of the Middle Eastern instruments that I wanted to replicate. And so when you play those scales on a melodica, it actually sounds pretty much like it. It can also sound very bluesy. But I found that my drumming changed as a result of just thinking about just taking one long note. I unfortunately I don't have my melodica next to me, but just taking one long note and making it louder and then softer, and then just what that does to my head. So even when I may be playing with my sticks on an instrument, I'm still thinking about what it felt like when my breath was controlling the nuance of the sound.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty amazing, actually. The way a melody can change the approach towards drumming. I've seen it time and time again. I grew up playing guitar and drums.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like, this is just my opinion, I feel like I've always been able to be quite melodic. But then sometimes I'll almost zone out of the guitar. I'll go through these periods where I'll be like, I'm not playing any guitar. And I notice how, for lack of a better term, how more meat and potatoes or caveman barbaric my drumming becomes.
Mm.
Or vice versa. Sometimes I'll forget about the drums and just pick up the guitar for weeks or months on end, and I'll be like, I don't approach it quite so rhythmically. They definitely sort of entwine in each other,
Yeah,
melody and rhythm, you know?
I'm a firm believer of that. So getting back to the composition stuff in terms of the way I do it, which I don't necessarily recommend, but it's just my process more often than not, is I just start playing, and then I will frequently, maybe it's something that I record, or Jim, my engineer, has recorded. It's just me playing a variety of percussion things, or maybe it's just drums or whatever like that. Sometimes I'll record I use this thing called iTabla Pro sometimes, which has all these Indian tabla patterns, and eight and a half time, or all these different time signatures. So I'll use that as something that is a metronome, and B, something that is actually a rhythm that exists in nature. So I'm playing from something. And then what I've been enjoying doing after that is just taking that and playing that, and then I have one of these Korg Nautilus workstations that then I'll just start coming up with melodies that fit the rhythmic structure of what I'm doing.
Mm.
So that's a very different process than when I was composing for a theater thing. And sometimes I had to write music for other people to sing, so that was very different. And then, or I'm writing something that fits a specific scene. So it's got to be X amount of seconds, approximately, or whatever. But I find as I continue to celebrate birthdays, I find that I'm much more interested in just kind of an organic approach to creating music, and then a lot of the composition process actually occurs in the editing process. So, for example, when Dave Ballo came over and we recorded Lunch Break, I was literally taking a break. It was more of a espresso break. that wouldn't have sounded quite as
No,
good.
lunch break is good.
So, and he and I played together actually with some bands led by my friend Jeff Cosgrove, I mentioned earlier, and we never played duo, but we had duo space, and I just felt it would be cool. So I was recording some educational video for Gong Bops, one of the companies I work with, and I said, "Hey man, come on over, and we'll take an hour." And so literally, it was an hour, and we just played straight.
Wow.
And there were no second takes, no thinking about it, no, not really even any talking about it. We did talk a little bit at the beginning. I was saying, I wanted things to feel riff driven and groovy. I didn't want it to get. I wanted to get a little bit out there, but not too far. And so after that, I did do some overdubs. So there were some things where I played hand pan or frame drum or something like that, and then overdub some drum set. But then a lot of the composition took place in the editing process. So there were a couple times where we merged an element from one piece into the next. So and that just felt really organic, and it made it seem to me like there was it was at the same time very loose and organic, but the overdubs added another level of structure. Because I'd heard the Dave's trumpet lines, and so I was able to play something that was pretty much, if I wanted to, that was pretty much exactly in rhythmic synchronization with those, which brought an element of composition to it that wasn't there before, but it was initially being driven by the improvisation. So yeah, I mean, if any of your listeners that are familiar with Bitches Brew, huge influence on me.
I got that vibe when I was listening to it. Whenever I do interviews with people, while I'm doing the research, I always put their records on. Unfortunately, I didn't make note of the couple songs that I'd listened to, but I was like, man, this gives me that kind of vibe. It's almost like improv, avant-garde, bebop, but not quite as quick, jazzy. That's world music, jazzy world music. But it's cool. It's really cool.
What I didn't dig into then, but I'm getting more and more interested in it is yeah, that of course Bitches Brew had was some of the cool electronic stuff. This was a little bit. It had in terms of process was very much driven by the Bitches Brew vibe, because there was a lot of the. I don't want to call it that, but the semi avant-garde music at that time that was coming out, where it really wasn't something that you could often tap your foot to, or find a specific groove. And I'm not saying that's good or bad, but that's the way a lot of that is. And I like some music that's like that. And there are parts of Lunch Break that borrow from that tradition as well. But too much of that for me only, I lose interest in it. If there's something, I mean, I go back to that way I felt when I was in New Orleans, and it was like the only place I ever saw where white people were dancing and they didn't look stupid. It was and it was because it was a groove. There was this cool thing on PBS last night about the history of funk, and and had a lot of the James Brown stuff, and that's kind of, I always go back and say, if there's not one level of the JBF in my music, I get bored, and that's the James Brown factor.
Yeah.
So and Bitches Brew's got that, that not all the time, but if you listen to that, like Miles Runs the Voodoo Down, it's like that. It's totally cool, and you can go back and listen to some of that Max Roach, like Buster Rides Again, and he's basically playing linear funk. So there's really nothing that new under the sun. I believe it's a matter of collating all of that material, or not all of it, but the material that you want to have be a part of your thing, and then finding a way to mix and match that, rather like you're a cook, and you want to find spices that are homogeneous with one another. You maybe you don't want to mix too much sugar with garlic, so maybe you do, but but you want to find something where everything feels like it's headed in a direction, and then, but it doesn't, in my opinion, it doesn't need to be something that already exists, and it's more interesting actually to me if it doesn't already exist.
I have to agree. Tom, what do you think has been the hardest part about being a career musician for you?
Well, there are few different challenges that come across. I have to say that for someone who has taken a pretty unusual path with a career in music, I've really been blessed, with the ability. I've never gotten super famous, but I've always done unusual work and had a lot of it, you know. Uh, and even currently, I should not say always, but enough that I am comfortable. Uh, for some of your young musicians, I'll throw this out because I do a fair amount of teaching. Any of you young people, if you haven't started an IRA, do it. Start creating something that will give you the flexibility in the future to call the shots. So let's say you're making some decent money now. That might not be the case in 2 years or 6 months or 9 months or 5 years or something like that. So start building a financial base that allows you to be a musician if that's what you want to do.
Great advice.
I'll get off that soapbox, but that's very important. I'd say the other thing is just, don't get caught into the trappings of the business. So my first record was uh very, very mainstream thing. It's kind of like I was playing drums on half the record and then vibes and marimba on the other half. So it was all standard tunes. It was like a little bebop, some, softly as the morning sunrise, a couple Charlie Parker things, just very, very straight ahead. Uh and nobody knew me from anything. The record was for what it was really successful. It got a lot of nice press. I didn't even have a publicist, and it got a lot of radio play. So I thought that's cool. And then somewhere and along those lines was when I was kind of switching my vibe to something that was more experimental and world music and a little bit of the electronics and stuff like that. So it was a lot. It was a lot more difficult to pigeonhole. So I thought, well, this is what it is now. Let's see what happens. So I'm just throwing this out. So if this happens to somebody else, that they take it in stride. And I remember, and it was around Christmas time. And so I get this. I think it was. I don't want to mention the magazine because they have since reviewed some of my things very positively. So I'll just say a magazine that publishes a lot of jazz reviews. So they send you a copy of the magazine, when your thing is reviewed, and so I'm looking. I want to see what it says, and it's like around Christmas time too. So and the review starts while a lot of my colleagues are putting together their best of whatever that year was. I've decided to put together a list of the worst of.
Oh no. Yeah, everyone's a critic, man.
I was just
heartbreaking.
I was devastated.
Of course you would be.
And but I mean, I'll be very honest. While that could potentially happen to me now, devastated. No, I probably would be a little, whatever. But yeah, I'd probably be a little hurt, but it would roll off my back quickly.
Yeah.
And that again, just like turning on the red light and practicing and getting comfortable, what it made me do though was double down on my commitment. So when getting back to your original question on that, how do you what's hard and maintaining your vision and commitment, when under times of critical duress or not working or whatever it is that's pulling on your, that's not making it great. How do you take that negativity and actually be like a weightlifter that it's actually putting on more weight and it's making you stronger. So I mean, that's something that is so easy to say and not so easy to do. But for some young people who are out there listening, it's good advice. Had I heard that the week before that review came in, I would probably reacted a little differently.
Yeah, but that's the beauty of experience as well, because it is when you read certain things like that, especially on your first few. It's almost like you take it personally because you're like, well, what did I do that person dislikes this so much? But as you grow as a musician and as you put out more releases, you realize that it might not be for everybody. And that's okay because you hear things that aren't always for you. And that's just how it is,
It's how it is. And I'm just to circle back to Bitches Brew.
Yeah.
When that came out, that got. I mean, there were some people that really loved it, but Miles got pretty beat up on that. And I'm gonna work with the assumption I don't think he lost any sleep over it, because what he had was he I know what the fuck I'm doing, It's like these people write about what I do it, so if you can maintain that and maintain your vision, knowing that the vision can change. I mean, there may come a time where you pull all this together, and maybe that's partly driven by reviews or something else, and you go, maybe I do need to switch gears a little bit. Maybe this does need some alteration, but you're doing it because you want to do it, not because you're trying to second guess what you think somebody else is going to like.
100%. Just to bring a bit of comedy to this for a second, did you ever see the movie Spinal Tap?
Oh yeah, of course.
I love that part of Spinal Tap when the journalist is talking to them and he's like, I can't remember which album, but hypothetically, your third album, Shark Sandwich, only got a 2-word review. Shit sandwich. I love that. It's just like such genius. That's just genius comedy to me. Tom, I have 2 last questions for you. This is my second last one. And I just thought maybe you can indulge us. Tell us about your performances at the Kennedy Center. I don't believe I've interviewed anybody who's performed there. I wanted to know how an event like that, the timeline kind of works, how it sort of works for the musicians. Do you find yourself sitting in a room surrounded by security? What's it like? Is it just like a standard gig? What's the deal?
Well, I mean, the Kennedy Center now has a kind of an orange cloud that's hanging over it. But there was a time when I would play there with some frequency. So I did a residency there where I did a series of four concerts within a month. So each week I did a different project. And the first one was a solo percussion. The second one I did was, at that time I was doing some work with Hesperus, which is an early music ensemble, and we toured Europe a little bit. So that was a program, where we combined some early music with some jazz and a little bit of the digital looping and all that kind of stuff. And then I did a program with Alessandra Belloni, who's a maestro on the South Italian tambourine technique, and also works with all of the folkloric songs and dances from the South Italy. And then the last one I did with my Charles Williams, who is on the recording Wisdom, where we did a lot of the Langston Hughes poetry. And then another time, I was contacted by, I think it was, I was chairing the percussion department at the Levine School of Music, and through some roundabout way, a composer, Robert Capello, was going to be creating a piece called City Piece. He had this thing that he would travel around the country and find elements of music from that area, and then write a piece that pulled all those together. So one thing he wanted to do was have something with some go-go kind of thing. So he knew about the kids playing on the buckets in the streets and stuff like that. So he wanted an element of that. So somehow he was connected with me as somebody that could figure out a way to kind of serve as a translator between what the percussion section would do and then what that had elements with like the classical guys, playing on inverted buckets and all that kind of stuff. So like any good freelancer, I wrote myself into the piece as a soloist on frame drum, because there was a little bit of like a Native American thing, because that's part of the history of Washington D.C., like all over the country actually. But and so I wrote myself in as a soloist on frame drum, even though I was playing it more with the Mesopotamian style, and so that became a big project. And then since then, I played at the Kennedy Center numerous other times. I played there with Chow Tien, doing a hammered dulcimer, and then I've done a few other solo projects there. I haven't done my movies there yet, but I would like to do that at some point. but yeah, I mean, it's just another to be blunt. It's just another venue. You know,
Interesting. Interesting. Last question. What do you think has been either the best piece of advice you've ever received in regards to a music career, or if you can't think of a specific piece of advice, what do you think could serve as good advice to somebody else in regards to something you've maybe learnt along the way?
Yeah, I've had so much. I've been the recipient of so much good advice, and sometimes the good advice is not music specific. I mean, music is just a microcosm of your life, right? So, I think that I'm going to answer that question by in some ways kind of summarizing some of the things that we touched on before, just so that it kind of like puts a lot of that material in together in kind of a bullet point format. So the first thing is, get it together. If you're going to be a musician, be honest about the quality of your skill level, and be always elevating it. Always be a student. Don't if you ever get to the place where you think you've got it together, go sell insurance or something. Because A, you don't have it together, and B, you've become jaded. So always be a curious student, and that will keep you excited and energized. Always think about how your music serves a function other than your ego. So and it's hard to do because you have to have some kind of ego, or you be doing something else probably. But so for me, it was getting work find doing these State Department tours, and having a young Iraqi kid see me as like the first American he'd ever seen that wasn't carrying a long arm and wearing a military uniform. So all you got to do is smile, and it's already a victory. So whatever it is that you do, however you use your music, make sure that it is in some way it's in service to something besides yourself. That will empower everything you do. Getting into a little bit of the fine tuning thing, learn some of the technology. Probably most of the recipients here are probably higher on their technology skill level than I am. But if you're not, learn some, and whatever it is, you learn more. And I'd also recommend you get some tangible business skills, because at the end of the day, if you're doing this to actually make a vocation out of it, not an avocation, it's a business, and a lot of the stuff that is the business of keeping my ship afloat is not what I want to do. It's like writing contracts and rewriting contracts and restipulating grant stuff, and travel plans and all that stuff. So learn to be efficient with that. Start to develop a base of constituencies, so that's going to be people who like your music, fans, for lack of a better word. Maybe it's reviewers, maybe it's radio people, maybe it's people in an industry, a side industry, whatever that might be. But realize that you are selling a product.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, be what does don't fall into the trap of I want to be Steve Smith. I want to be Steve Gadd. I want to. We've got a lot of Steves. I want to be Max Roach. It's like what create the thing that makes you different. That you'll, because all those people that you mentioned, or that I mentioned, or you might mention, that's what they did. If Steve Gadd said, I want to be Bernard Purdie, he wouldn't have been Steve Gadd.
Exactly.
And if Bernard Purdie said, "I want to be Al Jackson," he wouldn't have been Bernard Purdie. So and cast that net wide. And it's not just your musical influences. It's like the totality of your experience as a human, and that shapes everybody. That's what gives you your thumbprint of what your music will be like. And then from there, just have the strength of your convictions. Go forward.
Couldn't agree more, man. And what a beautiful way to finish this off. Tom Teasley, dude, I can't thank you enough for your time. I love just the different aspects. It doesn't matter who I talk to, there's always different aspects and variables. And it's just such a beautiful thing to see about life for me, So thank you for your time. And I wish you nothing but success on your journey and with music and just all the things. Let's do it again sometime, man.
I look forward to it, and thank you so much for being such a gracious host. And I just would like to add that all of your listeners are free to reach out to me. I'm having my website rebuilt. It probably will be maybe up and going by the time this is out, but there's a landing page, so you can just go to tomteasley.com. Follow me on Instagram, Facebook. Insight Timer if you're a meditator, certainly Bandcamp and Spotify, and listen, open a dialogue. If I said something that strikes you as interest, feel free to follow up with a question.
Amazing. Yeah, I'll put all your links in the show notes. And until next time, peace.
Peace.
All right, there we have it. Another episode done and dusted. I want to publicly thank Tom for his time. As usual, I want to thank each and every one of you for your time. Thank you for continuing with me on this journey. Please make sure you subscribe at musicians-mentor.com. As usual, if you would like any additional information or help or advice or just any random chats regarding your band or artistic career, drop me a DM or an email. My name is Travis Mark. I will catch you on the next one. Until then, be diligent, make some plans, but have some fun. Peace.